Hello everyone, my name is Simone and this is a quick tutorial on how to get your Next.js app router application running on Cloudflare pages. The first step is to create a Next application as we normally do with the Create Next App toolkit. What we need to get started is a terminal, Visual Studio Code and a browser window. Okay, let's start. We start by typing the command pm create next app. You might as well use npx if you prefer, it's just up to you. And we just leave the default option. We don't really want to get into the details here. The important thing is that you select the app router because Cloudflare pages cannot run pages router applications. Okay, let's enter the folder and try to start the dev server with pnpm run dev, and let's check if everything is working correctly as it should. And yeah, okay, we did it. The next step is to install the Cloudflare dependencies. There are 3 packages that are required, and let's go through them and see what we need them for. The first package to install is called Cloudflare Next on Pages. It's some kind of adapter that helps us during development and has the difficult job of preparing the build. So let's install it. You can probably have it as a dev dependency as well. It's used only in development and during the build phase. The second package we need to install, it's called Wrangler, and it's the Cloudflare command line interface. So basically everything you can do from the Cloudflare dashboard, you can do it from Wrangler as well, and we'll use it in this tutorial for a couple of commands. The third package we need is called Cloudflare workers types, and it just contains TypeScript definitions for a database we'll use later on. If you don't need type definitions, you can skip this step. The next step is to configure the dev server. We can use the Next dev server just using pnpm run dev, but we need to add just a couple of lines to the Next config file so that our development server, the Next development server, knows that we are actually running an application built for Cloudflare pages. And okay, it's super easy. So we just go to the Next config file and add one line if the process env, not env, is development, because this is a dev server thing. We will just need to set up the dev platform. And let's check the method name. Let's try to import it so we don't have to remember the name. So we import from Cloudflare Next on Pages. And yes, it's Cloudflare Next on Pages / Next dev. And from here we will import setup dev platform. And we'll just call this method from this statement. The only thing we need to remember here is to pass persist true to the method, so the database, all the content of our local development database will be persisted to disk. Otherwise, every time we start the dev server, we start with an empty database. Again, this is important just because we are using a database here. If you're not using a database, or if you're using an external service, then you don't need this line. Okay, the second thing we need to do is we create a config file. It's called wrangler.toml. We create it in the root of the project. Again, nothing, we just have to remember the name and the weird format. For some reason, it's now JSON. And for now, in this config file, we just have the name of our app, put whatever we want here. And something we'll also need later on is we need to enable Node.js compatibility, because the Next on Pages adapter requires some Node.js modules, which the Cloudflare pages runtime doesn't have by default. Okay, let's see if the dev server still works as it should. And yes, okay, no build errors, and our application is still here, up and running. What I really recommend is to deploy as frequently as possible, at least during the initial phases of coding, so you can catch errors again, as early as possible. The development server doesn't run your code, does not run your code in an environment that's similar to the Cloudflare pages production. So you might have some code that works while developing on the dev server, but it doesn't work once you deploy it. So deploy as frequently as possible, especially in the early stages of development. Before we deploy the first time, I'd like to build with the Next build toolkit. So just pm run build. It will build the app normally, just to make sure that there's nothing weird here, like linting. But that's not necessary, just my personal preference. So pm exec next on pages, and what this command does, it builds the application, again, using the Vercel command line, and it's somehow wrapped so it can be deployed to Cloudflare pages. Again, we shouldn't expect any error as the previous command was successful, and this command outputs the code in Vercel output static, and we just need to execute Wrangler with as pm exec Wrangler pages deploy and the name of the folder that was the output of the previous command. Since this is the first time we are deploying the application, I will just create a new project and give it whatever name, and for now we just keep the Git integration because we are deploying manually. Okay, so Wrangler is just uploading the files to the Cloudflare pages API, and it gives us a URL. And also we get this warning. This is something we are gonna fix now. So it's telling us you didn't specify Node.js compat, so the code you wrote, your application might not work. We actually did specify Node.js compact, if you remember, but for some reason this is not picked up by Wrangler. So we'll see how to add this flag from the Cloudflare dashboard as well. Anyway, at the end of the command, you get the URL of the deployment. For the first time you deploy the application, the URL is not available immediately because you need to wait a couple of minutes for the DNS propagation. I use an incognito window here in Chrome, so the DNS results don't get cached. But anyway, it takes a couple of minutes. You can also view the top level. You can also access the top level domain. For example, in this case, you can access the app from myappworkshop.pages.dev. And this is what we're doing here. As expected, we get the error we were warned about, and about the Node.js compact flag that's not correctly set. So let's go to the Cloudflare dashboard, and so you open your Cloudflare dashboard, go to workers and pages. You will find it on the menu on the left sidebar. Go to workers and pages, select your application, and go to settings. Once you're in settings, select the functions submenu and scroll down until you see a section mentioning compatibility flags. And here, inside the production compatibility flags, we just copy paste the name of the flag that we are supposed to set. Okay, Node.js compact, save. And we do the same for preview. We'll not talk about preview deployments here in this talk, but it's fine. Just do it. It might be useful later. We changed some settings, so we just need to deploy again. We don't need to build the app again because we didn't change any code. We just need to trigger the deploy again. So a new container is created, a new application is deployed with a new URL on the Cloudflare side. Okay. Again, we got a deployment URL, or we can just visit the top level domain for to access, to load the latest version of the app. And okay, it's deployed, and like we did it with the first part. So we created a Next.js application, we built it, we deployed, and we saw that we need to manually update a flag in the Cloudflare dashboard. And okay, that's it for the first part. Next, we are going to add a D1 database and see how we can access it from the React code, from the server component. So if you're not interested, you can just skip to the end of the video for a recap of all the changes. If you're interested in adding a D1 database, just follow on. Back to our terminal, let's create a new database. Cloudflare D1 is the service we will use as our database provider. It's fully serverless and very, very cheap, so it's perfect, even if it's in beta, it's perfect for our use case. So let's do npm, pnpm, exec, wrangler, D1, and let's see which are the options here. We want to create a D1 database. So let's do pnpm, exec, D1, exec wrangler, D1, create my app, which is the name of the database. Let's keep it the same as the app name, just to make it simple. Okay, the database has been created, and we just need to copy the output here at the end of the command in our wrangler.toml file. This code contains the ID of the database, and we just need to add this line preview database ID equal db, so we can use the database while doing local development as well. We'll need to populate the database. So let's just write with the help of Copilot a SQL script to create a table, maybe for a to-do list. Let's do it. Simple example, boring example, to-do list. So just following Copilot suggestions here. So we'll create a table in the database and insert maybe 3 items. And that should be it. Maybe just okay, let's drop the table so it's easy to clean up the database if we need to run multiple tests, and this script doesn't fail if the table already exists. Okay, we can use Wrangler to execute the SQL script. So we just pnpm exec Wrangler D1 execute, and let's see which are the options here. So we should be passing one argument, the database name. Yeah, so let's type the command again. pnpm exec Wrangler D1 execute the name of the app, and also wants an additional command line argument file, the SQL file to execute. Okay, so we executed the SQL file to initialize our production database. Here it's recommending us to use the local flag as well. So we run the same command again to execute the same script on the local database. As we said on Cloudflare, storage, local, and the production is separate. Okay, so we have 2 separate databases, and there's no way we can access production from our development application. When we run the command with local, the database is persisted to a local file. One more step before we can actually use our database, we need to go to the Cloudflare dashboard, again in settings, functions, and connect our database that we just created to the variable. Okay, so we just connect the my app database to the DB environment variable. We do this for production and preview, so we're not going to forget, even if we're not using preview in this demo. Okay, so we created a database, and we connected it to our app in development by adding the 3 lines of code to the Wrangler toml file, and in production by updating the settings inside the functions bindings. The next step is to write the actual React components to query the database, to list the to-do items, and to create a new to-do item. So, okay, let's do that. Let's start from the page, the main page, so the top level page tsx file. We start by cleaning it up a bit. We don't need all of these default things that the create next app puts here. So let's delete it. We just have a div, just basic styling. We can do a class name, margin 4, flex call gap 4. And let's just see what Copilot wants to give us. Okay, I'm happy with the title, and maybe a description, and okay, add your items to the to-do list, and then let's print the to-do list here as a UL. Let's have a loop, to-dos.map, print the item with the to-do. And let's accept the Copilot suggestions for now, and then we'll see if it works or if we need to change anything. Okay, let's maybe make Copilot TypeScript happy by creating a to-dos array. So let's keep it empty for now, and so add the type definitions. So to-do has an ID. We need to copy the database here at this point. So to-do has an ID, a description, and let's check a completed attribute, which should be Boolean. Cool. Let's add the type here. Nice. And fix here it's description, not title. Cool. Let's fetch let's see how we can access the database now. So the way we access the database is to call a function called getRequestContext that returns a Cloudflare environment, a Cloudflare env type variable, which includes our DB reference. TypeScript is not happy here, so we just need to define this in an env.ts file. So basically what we need to do here is to tell TypeScript that we have a DB property inside Cloudflare env, which is of D1 database type. Okay, let's use the autocomplete here to get the type definition. And going back to page TSX, now even TypeScript is happy. So we have access to the Cloudflare env and we can access a DB property on it. Okay, and DB is the D1 database that we can now query. The way we query the database is by awaiting db.prepare, and this is like normal SQL query, so select all from the table name, and yeah, let's use .all, and here this is parametric, so we can specify to do, so the return type will be correct. Two things here. Okay, let's remove the placeholder definitions, and since we need a wait, we also need async in the function definition. Again, we can do this because this is a server component, and it's complaining about something here. Oh yeah, because the to-dos are actually returned in a results array. We get the results as to-dos, and yeah, cool. If TypeScript is happy, we are happy. Let's clean it up a bit. And let's run the dev server, pnpm, run dev. No errors, which we like. And going back to the browser. We'll just open again, localhost 3000. Perfect. Okay, this is interesting. This is an interesting error to get, because like, sooner or later you're gonna get it sooner or later, because there's one thing that we forgot. It's actually required, but it's easy to forget. So we forgot about export const runtime equal edge, because Cloudflare pages only supports the edge runtime. So and this means that at the top of every file we need to export the runtime. Okay, now different error, because okay, the table was named to-do list, not to-do. So let's update the query. And yeah, okay, wow. We have it, we made it. So we're reading the databases, so it's super easy. We don't have connection strings, passwords, API key. Everything is done automatically by Cloudflare, which is super cool. As we said, it's better if we deploy step by step. like as we work on things, we just build and deploy. So let's build. We call the command again pnpm exec next on pages, which internally calls versal build. Let's wait for the build, hopefully with no errors, and then we can call Wrangler again to deploy the build application. Cool. Okay, so let's call the Wrangler command again, pnpm exec Wrangler pages, which is the name of the service, deploy, and the path, versal output static. We can ignore this git warning because we are not committing, it's fine. Deploy, okay, as you see, it's deployed super fast, and we are given, again, a unique URL. We can visit the URL or just visit the top level URL for our application, and yeah, here is it. It's running in production. And okay, cool. Let's continue. So what we want to do now is probably to be able to add some to-do items. So we can have like some inputs to input a description for a new to-do item, and yeah. Maybe we also need a submit button, and we also need to wrap all of this inside the form. Here we want to use React server side, React server forms. So we can, okay, let's add some styling first. Cool. We can add an action property, which is a function that will be called when the form is submitted, and the function can be a server-side function. So we have create to-do, server functions need to be async, server action, sorry. And this gets a form data object. And maybe instead of tag, let's have a name, otherwise it's not going to be sent. Name description, so we match the database schema. So const description equal form data get description. Okay. And then we can finally execute the query. The query is db.prepare. Okay, Copilot has kind of an idea what we want to do here. So let's follow what Copilot says, except that we need to call .bind to fill in the question marks in the statement, and then run the query at the end. Cool. Let's start the dev server again, and let's see what we get here. Okay, something is okay. Functions cannot be passed directly to child components. Let's go back to the code, see what we did. Okay, we were missing the use server statement. And we also can't access the db variable from outside of the server function, so we need to just define it again. Let's see what happens now. Okay, nice. Database errors are nice and easily readable. Here, instead of false, we need to pass 0. Let's try again. Buy pasta, add, and just give it a refresh. Okay. Let's clean it up a bit. And we can also add, at the end, we can add revalidate path slash, so we don't have to hard refresh the page. And as soon as we submit the form, we will get the updated list. Let's try. Buy sauce for the pasta and add. Okay, you see? It doesn't clear the input. If we want, we can optimize and okay, do whatever we like with client-side forms and form state and so on, but for this demo, this is more than fine. Again, let's try to build it with pnpm exec next on pages. This builds the project with the Versal toolkit and wraps it somehow to be deployable on Cloudflare pages. Okay, build is successful, and we just need to deploy with npm exec wrangler pages deploy and the path to the output folder. It doesn't change, it's always the same. Cool. We got a new unique URL. As always, we can visit this URL, give it a couple of minutes for the next DNS propagation, or we can visit the top level URL. See, we have the new deployment. Let's buy a house this time. Click add. Yeah, it works. We did it. Let's summarize all these steps. So we access the database and other bindings if you're using other Cloudflare services from the env return from request context. You have to define the types of what's in the Cloudflare env. From here in the DTS file, you can have D1 database, key value stores, and so on. When you create a resource with Wrangler, it gives you a piece of code that you need to copy paste into wrangler.toml to be able to use the resource locally while developing. And don't forget to export runtime edge, otherwise you get a weird error. Everything is the same typical Next.js 14.1. Well, that's it. I hope you enjoyed this quick workshop on how to deploy Next.js app router applications on Cloudflare pages, basically for free. And have a nice day.